what's so funny about it on the dev side is just the fact that, like, what goes into making a boss fight good then is oftentimes kind of like working against the usual flow of all the designs so far in the game.
Butterscotch.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 572 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the weekly podcast for indie game developers. I'm Seth and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam, the web programmer.
I'm Sam about taste.
And we are Butterscotch Shenanigans. Today is May 8th, 2020 quick. May 8th. Before we get into the main episode, we do have a donation and a message from our moneygrab.bscotch.net donation place, Ko-Fi.
Ko-Fi.
Yeah. And this message comes from Hot Claw, who, now I'm going to read this, and I got something to say about it.
Okay. Go.
Hot Claw says, "Hi, picked up Levelhead again recently on mobile, and my not-so-fat fingers just couldn't find the bit you have to grab to drag a level to a cloud slot. I found it on PC, but maybe make the whole card draggable. Sorry for the nitpick. My kids and I love everything you make." So, I would say you actually don't have to pay us to file a support ticket. You can just straight up.
No. Nope.
Actually, no.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Actually,
Thank you for
let's normalize this. Wait a second.
Thank you for realizing that that's the most. Although,
That's
is
the
it
pre-
the most
that's the-
effective way to get something to happen? Because are you going to do anything about it?
Certainly, we're not going to do anything
Oh,
about
absolutely.
it. Levelhead.
We
is-
did read it,
hear
though.
you.
Levelhead is locked in, and we appreciate the support though. Yeah.
Yes.
And hopefully you enjoy How Many Dudes as much as you enjoyed trying to drag cards around on the Levelhead workshop screen.
Yep. And if you've been a long time listener to the podcast, then we always hope that someday something will happen and Levelhead will take off, and then that day we can look at it and be like, okay, let's
All right, we'll make a few updates.
let's touch that up a tiny bit. Hey, maybe How Many Dudes will take off so big that a tiny meager percentage of crossover from that.
Nope. It's
There
never
was
going
a-
to happen,
Yeah,
buddy.
yeah,
I don't know.
maybe.
You get 10 million people playing How Many Dudes, and they'll be like, I love this chill game that's low stress where I can just kind of vibe.
Yeah, let's go.
Which has really put me in the mood for an extremely cognitively demanding game that requires fast twitch reaction times
Yeah,
and lots of
you know?
planning.
That happens. That's as we're always talking about the podcast, it's really easy to get somebody to play a completely different kind of game from
Just
the
a
one
completely
they've
different
been playing. So,
So yeah, especially one that's way harder.
Yeah.
Just people love that shit.
they really do.
So let's get into the news for this episode. We'll be talking about our tagging experiments, which back on episode 569 on April 22nd episode, we talked about how we were messing around with our Steam tags and some theories behind that. Well, now we have some numbers from that. So we'll talk about
So
that.
it's been, a couple weeks?
It's been a few weeks. And then we'll talk about, we've been working on boss fights this week for How Many Dudes for the final bosses. So we'll get into that. And there's one other thing that I want to mention before we get into those things, which is our podcast YouTube channel hit 500 subscribers.
Hey!
Which I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but that's
It's
like
not a lot.
that's like 1/20th of the population of the town that we grew up in. You
Yeah.
know? So
Yeah.
if you
Yeah,
think
we've
about
always
that,
measured our success as the years have gone on and the growth of our empire, And how many Grinnells is that?
Yeah, we're from Grinnell, Iowa, which is a town of 10,000 people, which is a nice number that you can use as a metric.
Though
Yeah.
when we say 10,000, I think it's kind of in the way that like when you're a teenage boy and you're like, how tall are you? And you're like, oh, I'm gonna.
It's
give
probably
myself
more
a
like
little-
8,000.
Give myself
We'll round
Actually,
it up.
speaking of that, I have no memory of ever lying about my height, like ever deciding to do that. Right? I have no.
We did have
memory.
spiky hair, which I feel like is lying about your
Well,
height.
yeah.
but-
Also, when you get your height measured, it's
Yeah.
basically kind of random because who knows what kind of measuring device. So anyway,
Yeah.
so as far as I've been concerned, anytime anybody asks my height, which is what only the doctor, I'm always like 5'10", whatever. And then on a whim one day, I was like, let me see if I can measure how tall I am,
Hmm.
And on the one hand, I'm doing it by myself. It's hard to know for sure what it is. But as I was doing it, I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm like 5'9" or 5'9.5" or something like that. Like I'm pretty sure
A sub 5'10" situation.
but I'm pretty sure sub enough that calling it 5'10"
I get
was
you.
against the rules. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I think, but then I'm like, have I been lying this? Like, did I decide to lie at some point and then just forgot?
And you just locked it in?
Or have I shrunk a little bit? Or did I just get measured incorrectly? I don't know which one of those it is.
I mean, if you're not using Tinder, I don't think it matters.
Yeah, I know it literally doesn't matter. Yeah. But mostly it was just a curiosity. Because, like, when I was a teen, I cared a lot about how tall I was. Because everyone's,
but also you were growing, and so
it's very top of mind.
It's like your height is aspirational when you're a teen, because you like someday. Maybe I'm gonna say I'm 6 foot because I'm close. I'll get there. I'm working my way up.
Yeah. So like it felt like it mattered a lot, and now I couldn't give a single shit.
I've never really understood how it could ever matter, unless you're an astronaut or a fighter pilot or somebody who needs to get crammed into small spaces.
It's mostly better to be smaller, for most kinds of things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, but I just thought that was an interesting little.
Yeah.
Like realizing I am just wrong about the most basic
fact about your own shape,
and not having any idea the origin of the wrongness. Like was that a decision I made, or just an accident that happened?
How do myths begin?
How do myths begin?
That's the real question.
Yeah, I don't quite know how tall I am either, but it's in the ballpark of 5'8", but I don't know whether I'm above or below it, and by how much. Yeah. It's fine.
You could be 5 feet tall. You could be 6 feet tall. There's just no way to know.
There's simply no way to know.
No way to find out.
Yeah, and I will say though, like on the height thing, because most Fortune 500 CEOs are like at least 6 feet tall.
Yeah,
it is definitely the case that, like, as somebody who's like right around average height for men in the U.S., that I definitely feel something when I'm talking to somebody who's like 6'3". You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
really tall people. Where I'm just like,
he's like, wow.
I'm just like, you're in charge now. Like, I'm gonna defer all decisions to you because you're way up there. Clearly,
you're so big.
You can see further than me. You're bigger. You can reach things. You don't know what the top of my fridge looks like. I've never seen that fucking thing before in my life. I don't know what's up there. So
I think for me, it's actually kind of like weirdly the opposite in the sense that, like, it's been so ingrained into me that tall people end up in charge because they're tall that I just assume they don't know what the fuck they're doing. And so I'm like, I guess I'm in charge now to make sure that stuff happens. You know what I mean?
Well, there's a difference between knowing what you're doing and sticking out enough that everyone blames you for what happens. You know what I mean? I feel like tall people they stick out. So you're like, well, I mean, the tall guy, right? You can see him. Everyone can see him.
And
so whatever
being
happens,
in charge and knowing what you're doing, they don't really overlap ever.
That's
you know
true.
what I mean?
Yeah. Yes.
All right, let's get into the actual
Let's go.
episode. So let's talk about tags. So back on episode 569, a few weeks back, we talked about the Game Discover Co. Pro program, Pro tool.
Basically, we did a big tag analysis just to see where are our audiences actually at for our different games. Where are the affinity overlaps, which is just like people who have bought our games. What other games do they actually buy? Right.
And as a quick refresher for context, we're talking about Steam tags, which is the Steam system for slapping a label on a game that says, kind of gives you a vibe.
What's in it? What's it about? What type of game is it?
First-person shooter, funny, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and so the theory is that if you tag your game well, then it should be able to increase potential sales or something like that, on the order of like between 5 and 15% or some shit. I don't know, some like ballpark. It's not like crazy.
But potentially a lot more. The difference between tagging like really poorly and really well.
Yes.
Is a lot.
It's big.
But but once you get to the part where you're already doing fine, then now you're talking some kind of margin.
But what is tagging well? Well, go back to that episode and listen, because we talked about it for an hour.
So I'm not going to rehash all the details. So basically we changed up both Crash Sites 2 and Levelhead and How Many Dudes, actually, based on all the stuff we saw there. And in theory, the idea was that we should then see the game show up more for both, actually just for more games, period, if we had tagged it properly. But also for the stuff that when we looked at the more games like this section at the very bottom of those store pages, that it better reflected the stuff that we'd seen in that, like, affinity data. So in other words, games that show up in the more like this are games that the people that do play our games actually play, as opposed to like, maybe not, So I could say after a few weeks, basically they say you got to wait a few weeks, especially we just want to have at least some sales happening, in the background so that you can see or new players and wish list, because players tag stuff, right? And so the thing is that if you go change your tags, the developer tags have a lot of weight. But if they kind of like fall off, they'll like or get pushed down by player tags, right? Over time, then you will see a change in that, like more like this section, and you'll basically know that like maybe the people who are buying are not actually buying it in the kind of genre categories that I've tagged. So I can say that all of them stuck actually pretty well at this point, and so all those changes seem to be in the right direction. And I went and looked through, and it's tricky because like again the how long it takes for the stuff to like really show itself is a long time, and also it might be a margin thing that's kind of unclear.
Yeah.
Nothing's gone down in a significant way, so
Okay.
just to know that's good.
So far, that's good.
The number of games that are like more like this has gone up, and again, when I look at the more like this thing, they're all the ones that we want now. So that's all good.
And what it means to be like to have more games that are more like this, it just means that when somebody is looking at those games, it's more likely that
Pointing over.
our game appears. So it's basically it's a natural, organic discovery mechanism. If you can, because now even if our games are otherwise not doing anything new that makes them show up more elsewhere, if those other games start showing up more and also are showing our game, then you get to kind of build off of that.
Yep. Does that apply to how many dudes? Because it's just a demo.
It does. Yeah. You can go look at the store page. You'll see more like this thing. And demos don't get surfaced nearly as much, or like just unannounced games or unlaunched games that you can't actually buy do not get surfaced in the same rate, right?
Yeah, so it's probably suppressed to some extent. But.
Yeah. So I did go through and try to look at essentially looking at just like that more like this little section to see if the impressions are up or the click throughs are up, stuff like that. And it does look like either both of those are up to some degree, but of course the data is just so fucking noisy. Like I said, it's not super clear that it's like it's not definitely not way up, and it's definitely not down. It's just like there's something happened, I guess is the best way to put it, and it looks like it's lined up with what we wanted to happen, but the degree of which it matters,
not dramatic.
Who knows? Yeah.
So either our tags were already pretty good, and then they got slightly better, or they were not that good, and we didn't really improve them, and we have no way to know that.
or we haven't had enough like sales throughput for it to for them to shake out in a meaningfully different way than what we've kind of seen.
Right.
That makes sense. So, yep, that's kind of the update.
Yeah, because I mean, it does mean like if you do again, because if you tag stuff well, that just means you're showing up with other games, but people have to be looking at those other games for it to show up. And so if all the games you're showing up with are games that are not like actively getting a lot of attention, then you're not getting much extra surfacing. And even if you are, of course, people are looking at that game, right? So the more like this thing is really good for discovery, but the rate at which you actually get a conversion from somebody looking at a game on purpose to seeing, ooh, here's some other games that look cool, and then checking that out, and then taking the next, like that's a dramatic drop off. So for this stuff to like really move, you got to show up with like at the top of that list for hugely successful games. The only way you can do that is if your game is already being successful too, right? So because all these things are positive feedback loops, so it'll always be hard to tell when nothing is going on.
Yeah. So I think I'll basically wait another month or so and then check in again, see if I can I can really see anything. But yeah, it hasn't been bad. So
what's annoying about all this is that like this feels like the kind of activity that you only really can do when you're in the middle of the pack, right? Like if your game is not getting any traction whatsoever, it's just not really appealing, then your tags don't fucking matter, right?
Yep.
On the flip side, if you're Grand Theft Auto,
also
nobody gives a fuck about you. Your tags have no
like there's so
effect.
there's so many players that you're not.
Yeah, you put up the store page for Silk Song, like it could be tagged as a fucking idle puzzle game or something, right? And like it's Silk Song, so it's gonna just
people are looking for it.
Yeah. So it's this funny
it's when discovery matters is when like the levers at your disposal to manipulate discovery.
Right, is when your game hasn't been discovered, but actually has potential for people to engage with it if they discover it.
Yes. So there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work in that chunk of stuff, right? Where it's like you have to be the one who drives almost all of that.
But in a way, it reminds me a lot of the sort of the allegory about like, why it's more expensive to buy cheap things. Like if you buy cheap shoes, they wear out really fast, and then you have to buy more of them, as opposed to like already being in a good position to buy a higher quality pair of shoes, and it'll last longer, and then you don't spend as much money on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same kind of thing where like it feels like once you get ahead, you have an audience, you have an anticipated title, whatever, and the amount of work that you have to do to actually like
secure
get it noticed, it goes down to zero.
We even see this, like we still have to do a lot of work for How Many Dudes, right? But compared to our past titles, we're seeing the same deal, right? Like we are having to do, like we're still doing
the same things
as much work because we're in the middle, right? We have to, but the efficacy of that work is so much higher than
it's visible. It produces visible results. Yeah. So it's, I don't know. I always have that dream of like someday
it just not
someday we won't even have to think about tags anymore, or which
that's the dream.
Yeah, but I also have to think like that probably only applies if we make like let's say How Many Dudes goes super well, and we make a sequel to How Many Dudes. Maybe in that case, but if we make a different game, I don't know. We might be right back.
I think you always got to do it. This is part of the process.
Yeah. So all right. Well, let's. So overall tag updates. It seems like maybe good, but we need more time.
Yeah, probably good.
So yeah, it's basically very likely not bad.
Correct. Which honestly is a lot of what we do is in that category. Very likely not bad. Zero quality.
Yeah, I mean, and often today? It's kind of like in science, where like you don't
it's just so annoying, man.
You don't prove stuff, right? That's not you don't find out what the truth is.
The number of like clear wins.
You've got a probability of possible ways to interpret.
And you can rule out stuff, right? Like so you can often rule out stuff in science, but you can't really rule in something, right? It's being like, this is what's happening. And it's the same deal with any kind of analysis work and all this. Is like, we can tell when something probably is not bad, right? We can tell that something hasn't happened, right?
Yep.
But it's hard to tell when something has happened, and it's hard to tell the cause of it, and it's hard to tell how big of an effect, and blah, 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 right?
Actually, we were just looking at our podcast download numbers, and like yesterday we had this massive spike of podcast downloads through something called Music Bee.
Yeah.
Where we're like, what is that? And then it turns out it's basically like a Winamp. It's like, it's just a media thing. It's a media player that apparently could surface podcasts. I'm like, I don't know how that happened. We didn't
do anything about that.
So like, I'd imagine if we had been in the midst of like some kind of a podcast visibility push or something, and then we see that big spike,
could be like, hell yeah, we did it.
Be like, we did it.
Actually,
except it's just a thing that happened.
Yep.
Yeah, the world is chaos. It's hard to know what's happening.
Yep.
All right, cool. Well, let's talk about How Many Dudes. Let's talk about boss fights.
Yeah. So basically, where we're at in dev now is we have basically a handful of enemies left to add into the additional challenging tiers of the game, and ahead of that, we wanted to get the end game better structured out, which largely revolves around the final bosses that you fight in any given tier challenge tier. So currently in the demo, you experience the GOAT, who's like the tier 1 gold star boss. So we added, there are 2 more tiers of challenge in the game, and there are 2 more deeper bosses that only show up in those contexts. The thing I want to talk about, I guess, with regards to boss fights is like from an indie perspective, because boss fights are sort of regardless of what the game is, right? Even if it's like a match 3, you want a boss fight because like in terms of like conceptually what is happening, which is that the player is sort of working up to something, and then instead of just an event, and then instead of the game just being the same as it has been the whole time, you want to layer something twisty and ideally more kind of cinematic with more tension in it, to just sort of like just a bigger payoff, a bigger payoff for whatever skills they've developed, and also because they can be like these really fun, shareable moments if you break kind of the paradigm of how the game works.
Yeah,
right?
You create surprises, you violate some of the things about how the game has worked so far. Create a bunch of surprise.
Yeah, boss fights they're an absolute joy on the player side, right? Because it's like they're always I don't know. It's like a culmination thing, right? And whenever you beat it finally, or even on the first try, sometimes, it is just like an exciting, cool thing. And so you want these kind of tension moments that people are building toward, and then hopefully being able to overcome. And I think what's so funny about it on the dev side is just the fact that like what goes into making a boss fight good then is oftentimes kind of like working against the usual flow of all the designs so far in the game, right?
Yeah, and probably also working against all of like the decisions you made in the code to make things really clean and nice, because now you got to violate how everything works, and so now all of a sudden all those good
Bosses are-
decisions you made
Yeah.
are now hard to work, with.
They're interesting
Yes.
because they're exceptions to the rules that you've established so far in a lot
Yeah,
of ways,
exactly.
right? Which means completely custom code
Everything.
and everything. Yeah.
But still has to integrate then, into whatever the bigger
Yeah,
code
which
base
is all to
is.
say they're extremely expensive to design and implement.
Yeah, very expensive, very hard to do. And in the case of like Crash Bandicoot 2, typically our turnaround when we're making those bosses is like 2 weeks or so of like very intense work. It's like a full week, if maybe a little more on the art side, and then writing up stories for it, the quest, and then they always, even in that game, despite all the stuff we did with the Game Changer, would always end up adding something a little bit new, right? Because again, like you're trying to make it so the player arrives at this moment and they're like, wow, you get this like an actual payoff for it. And so,
Well, and in Crash Bandicoot 2, every boss had it's kind of like tethered to a space in the world. And so we needed to kind of build out the boss arena, figure out where that's going to go. And then also in some cases, the boss arena had certain like markers or indicators in there about, these are the 5 spots of where the boss will like zip over to do these different things. This is where the boss will summon, like here are the different places where the boss can summon new enemies to fight, or whatever. So you gotta like build out the physical space. But then in Crash Bandicoot 2, it's like you fight the boss and you beat it, and then you're done with it.
Yep,
right? So it's a few minutes of content for a couple weeks of work.
That's kind of what bosses always are,
Yeah.
like kind of no matter what, unless you have more of a roguelike structure, right? That someone's going to repeat the boss fights. But even then, I mean, in terms of proportion of a player's time, playing like Hades or something, each of those little boss fights that you have, it's just a couple minutes. It's always just it's a tiny little piece, but it's like the pinnacle piece.
Yeah.
And so, I think with regards to how many dudes then, the big idea for us this week was to get those wrapped up so that we could kind of back out the design for how the rest of that endgame stuff felt, and actually be working on that for real as opposed to like the theoretical aspects of it. And so I do want to talk about the Kilipede. And how does this translate then in terms of some of these real problems we had with putting together, I'll say, the tier 2 Gold Star boss. I'm not going to reveal the tier 3 one because it's insane, but just the tier 2.
The tier 3 one is very good.
Yeah. So for those who've been playing the demo, we have on round 110 in the demo we have the goat, which is you have to defeat the goat, and that's how you get your gold stars. And the goat is a giant mecha goat with like several hundred rams alongside it that you kind of just like add chaos to the battle. So one of the first interesting problems with boss fights and how many dudes is that how many dudes is a game about large numbers of things fighting large numbers of things.
Yep.
You got, by the time you get to the end game, you got over 100 dudes, maybe 120, maybe 130. Maybe you're summoning 50 skeletons at the same time. You got a lot going on.
A lot of things on screen. Yep.
And if we're talking about a boss, as in like a specific individual entity that you're going to fight, having 150 dudes all piling around one thing and just punching it nonstop is fucking boring.
Yeah,
like it's really boring to just have something that's just like attacking dudes and just getting punched.
Just standing there. Yeah,
it's standing there. Because one of the things that makes the game fun and exciting to watch is all the movement, right? Like dudes getting thrown, chasing things, dashing around, like groups of dudes over here fighting enemies, and then they clear it out, and then they run over and join the rest of the team.
It's also what adds a lot of the sense of like risk as you're watching a fight unfold. Is if you got like one dude is over in a little corner getting surrounded, and you're like, oh no, that dude's fucked.
Yeah, he's got a saber-tooth tiger on him, and you're like, oh god, he doesn't even have a Spartan next to him. Like he can't block. And so a lot of that positional stuff is what adds to that fun vibe of the game. And that's the reason why, like in the goat fight in the demo, the goat has several moves that are all designed to either move the goat or move your dudes. So the goat leaps up and then smashes down, which throws all your dudes. And then it has a charge attack where it'll pick a dude and it'll zip through and hit all the dudes along the way. And then it also has a chance at the end of that to just instantly charge again. So the goat is moving around a lot really fast and throwing your dudes a lot to try to like add a lot of movement to the battle.
Mhm. Despite the fact that it ends up being basically like your team against one.
Yeah,
big
it's one thing versus 150 things, which and so that's kind of a huge challenge. And the other challenge is that by the time somebody gets to one of these end bosses, they're an hour and a half into this run,
Mhm.
and if the boss fight is really hard, people will be pissed off and they'll quit. Right. Like if they get all the way there and like their team has been doing like pretty good up to that point.
Which they don't have to be to get there.
Yeah.
Right.
Not like they're not like steamrolling everything, but they're just like, they're doing okay, right? Then they get to a boss. If that boss just completely obliterates them, then it's like, well, what the fuck? Like I made it all the way here.
Yeah, because
and I had no chance.
The difference with How Many Dudes versus frankly all the other games we worked on that are action games is that player skill in like How Many Dudes is about the strategy, like the choices you've made the whole time.
Yeah.
So there is no
first
way.
time in, you don't know what that boss is. You don't know what that boss is.
But even then, like even if you do know what it is, you can't
really plan for it.
Get better right at that moment. You can't be like, okay, I'm just going to dodge more this time. Like I know the patterns. You cannot do any of that. You have to have like structured this.
Yeah, you're locked in. Like when you get there, you're locked in. You have some consumables available that you can use to kind of boost yourself. But your team is what it is at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a weird way, like we can't make these bosses too insanely difficult.
Mm-hmm.
They're meant to be beaten. And they're meant to be fun to watch and kind of.
We think about they're like especially in the context of How Many Dudes, where you cannot as a player like actively change the course of things a lot.
You can't step in,
Yeah, because the consumables are on 3-second cooldown, so it's like you can only do a little bit, and it matters a lot actually, especially those boss fights. It does actually matter a lot that you do those things correctly, right? And you can turn the tide, but it's not like entirely. If you have a bad team, if you get there, it's not entirely possible for you to turn around, right? Depending, and so they should be the bosses. Like conceptually, we had to change our think about it, where it's like. They are the culmination of every choice you've made up to this point, which means they should be more sort of cinematic in nature.
Yeah. It's more about spectacle than difficulty, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, and it should feel there should be some tension again, as in like, if your team was like on the cusp of getting its ass kicked on the way to the boss should actually beat you.
Yep.
But if your team has been feeling strong up to the boss shouldn't be doing something that just completely is a 180 and then just suddenly your team can't fucking handle it whatsoever,
or even if that does happen, it should feel like it took time. It should feel like there was a turning point where like you almost were going to make it.
I feel like you understand
need
why
to have
that
a
happened,
whole
100%.
So and this has also been a challenge with like making bosses in like Crashlands or Crashlands 2, where we have some bosses that are hard gates to progress through the story and then other bosses that are optional side bosses. And we've always kind of taken the philosophy of like the main story bosses should look cool but not be that hard, because some players just don't have the skill to progress past it, and if they can't get past it, they literally can't move ahead in the story. Right? They're just stuck. Whereas the side bosses we can kind of just go nuts with, because they're side bosses. You don't you won't have to do it. And you could just like practice and get better, come back later and progress elsewhere. But of course, in How Many Dudes, these are main bosses because there are no side bosses. It's all just straight through, right? So, so the Kilipede then is our tier 2 boss. So then the way it works is compared to the demo, because the demo doesn't have these tiers of difficulty. So the way it works then in the full game is when you get a gold star for a dude in tier 1, that dude becomes available for you to play with in tier 2. So the teams that you can bring to tier 2 are dependent on how successful you've been with which dudes on tier 1. And so you'll probably have like a little bit of a stronger sense of how to build out your team by this point, and you'll have some extra consumables and other things kind of coming into the tier 2 run. But the run is a bit harder. So it's likely that like your team will be a little bit weaker in tier 2 coming into the end game than it was in tier 1. Because it's just tougher. So in tier 2, the goat, you fight the goat at round 105, which again in the demo was round 110. Now it's 105. If you beat the goat, And then 5 rounds later, you get
That's
hit
where the new gold
with
star
the
mark
Kilipede.
is. Yep.
Yeah. So each tier moves the gold star round ahead by 5 rounds. So it's 1 of 5 for tier 1.
Sticks a new boss at the end.
110 for, and you have to beat all the previous tier bosses to move ahead as well. So you beat the goat. 5 rounds later, you come across the Kilipede. And what we're doing with the Kilipede is we wanted to do something that kind of looked just like intimidating as fuck, you know? And everybody's scared of like snakes and
Bugs.
and centipedes and stuff like that. And so we put together this like big metal monstrosity of a sort of almost like industrial looking mecha centipede.
Think about it as it's like a blend between like a centipede and a train, like a steam engine and a tank.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. But here's
lots of segments, right?
But here's the trick. When it comes to a centipede, what makes it cool is when it's moving. So if you're fighting a centipede and it's just sitting there, you know, it's got its head on the front end and it's just chomping on dudes. And if all the segments and all, you know, its tail or whatever are just kind of like, you know, just laid out, just sitting there, not doing anything, then it doesn't really feel like a centipede and it doesn't look that cool.
It's also what makes a centipede in real life scary, right? Because they're ugly to look at and they're kind of intimidating already. But when they start running,
they start moving fast.
Too much.
No thanks.
Yeah. And so like, all right, if we want this thing to feel cool and feel cinematic, it's got to move, you know? So our first move with it was because the arena and how many dudes is big, it's big ellipse, big like spray painted red line around the outside. So like, let's have it like go into turbo mode and have it sort of just like snake around the edge of the arena a bunch. And each of its segments has a cannon on the top. So while it's zipping around the arena, its segments are sequentially shooting out mortars at your dudes. And then there's this kind of funny thing that happens there, which is like, while it's moving, your dudes are chasing it, but they can't really hit it easily. So if you've played How Many Dudes, it's probably reminiscent of like the horses, where the horses go into panic mode and they start running around and your dudes kind of chase them in a circle. And it's like you kind of lose some uptime and it's hard to hit it because it's just moving fast, right? So like, all right, it looks cool when it's doing this, but we can't just have it doing this the whole time because your dudes can't do anything, right? So what we did then instead was we added in an additional mode to it where it breaks apart. So its head, and this is kind of back to the idea of like, you have to kind of break the rules of
everything.
Yeah,
so this thing's already animated. It's basically a procedural animation thing, right? So it's like animated through code, keeping all these segments together like this big worm.
Yeah.
It's already doing shit that like does not exist anywhere else in the whole game, just to be scary, right?
And like in the baseline, the game started as like dudes fighting animals, right?
Yep.
And so behind the scenes, every enemy is encoded as an animal, like an animal type, right? So, but the head of the Kilipede is actually not one thing.
There's like 30 of them.
Yeah, it's a head animal. So one animal type is the head of the Kilipede. And when you fight the Kilipede, when it spawns in, the head spawns a bunch of body segments, which are a different type of animal. And then
this reminds me of like in Fallout, where it's like in some of the Skyrim games too. There's a behind the scenes things where they're like, yeah, actually a train is an NPC. You can see underground has legs
because has a train as a head.
Yeah, it's kind of shit you do where it's like in Fallout, just whatever their engine restrictions were, it was that if something is moving, it needs to be a character. And they had some kind of constraints on like what is a character and what's required for a character, and probably one of those constraints was it needs to have a body.
Yep.
Right. And probably needs to have a head, I guess. So so the trains are just a man underground with a train head running. So they probably had to create like some kind of separate physics plane for that dude to run on. You know,
I'm sure it was a whole fucking thing. But that's like the funny thing about getting to some of these endpoints where it's like you want to add this new thing onto the system, right? And it's like, okay, that means that kind of like a train is kind of like a man, actually, in
Sure.
code. And then
Yeah.
it's like,
You
you
know,
go
right,
from
the
there.
idea is like, well, yeah, what does a train do? Well, it just moves from one place to another, right?
Yeah.
And what people do that. So a train is just a kind of person.
Trade with
So,
people.
And actually,
yeah,
there's
trains are
another
people.
good Fallout story. I think it was Fallout 2. It was a 2D Fallout,
Mhm.
where at one point they had like a car that had a trunk that you could use to store stuff in. But up until that point, there was no concept of like chests or like objects to put your stuff in. You could only put your stuff in your companions who were following you around. You would like hand stuff to them and put it into their inventory, right? So the car trunk had to be programmed as a companion, as a companion character. And there was some kind of a bug where this, I don't know what the conditions were, but this trunk would actually detach from the car and start following you around like a companion. Which honestly, pretty convenient, because then you don't got to go back to the car to put your.
Awesome.
I mean, I kind of wish in real life I could get that.
Yeah,
So the Kilipede then it's a head animal with like 20 body segment animals that it creates, which also broke some stuff because no other creatures, no other animals, and how many dudes summon additional animals during the battle. Up until now, it's just like what you see on the matchup screen is what you get, right? So the Killipede's head spawns in, it summons its body parts. Each body part has code in it to say like, who am I following? Where am I in the train, right? But then at the start, we summon each of the body segments separated, and they're all in a ring around the outside of the arena, and the head is in the middle. It's weird because you come in thinking you're gonna fight a Kilipede, but instead you just see a bunch of like weird orbs around the outside with cannons on top, and then your dudes are in the middle just fighting some kind of big looking metal head thing. Then after a few seconds, all of the orbs then zip in and snap into place, and they form the train, and then the thing starts whipping around the arena. And so it kind of goes back and forth rhythmically into this like separate out the segments, which then start shooting your dudes, and then they snap back together into a Kilipede and then runs around. And so that's basically how we can sort of like, because when your dudes start chasing the Kilipede, your dudes all end up clustering, right? Because they're all chasing the same thing, and they all kind of come together. But
do
then
they chase the head, or do they pick a segment?
They just chase whatever's closest to them, which will usually end up being the last segment, because as it's moving, they all.
It's probably faster than them too, right? So
and so back to kind of the movement problem, right? Like if all your dudes are in the same spot fighting the same thing, it becomes less interesting, right? And so that's where the break apart mechanic happens. It's like, when it breaks apart, then all the segments are in different places. And so then your dude, like some of the segments will end up closer to some dudes than others, whatever. So your dudes will end up kind of like splitting out
little pockets.
And beating up different segments and stuff. And then like mortars are flying in out of the segments, and as each one hits the ground, it throws dudes. So it's like it's been difficult to come up with ways to kind of like have you fight quote one thing. While still having it feel like a big brawl where there's a lot of different things happening, right?
I think it's what's interesting is like when it comes to a boss fight, is you can have like the high concept things about boss fights, right? Which is this idea of like it's maybe more challenging than other parts of the game. It's like a test of player skill or kind of wherever they've gotten to at that point. It somehow is like more of like get the game, the core essence of the game, and it's always funny making them because you realize the extent to which, like, very, very specifically in the context of this specific game, how it might be the case that like certain aspects that you think are critical to a boss fight are actually like antithetical to however the design works. So like fighting one big thing, boring as hell and how many dudes. So then you have this problem, which is like, okay, well now we have to make bosses that somehow are multiple things. Are multiple things, but also still like one big thing without making it boring. I don't know. It's always like a really fun. It's just such a twisty little challenge because I think you have to really know what is interesting about the game in order to make a really good boss fight. And you just whiff so hard, right? Where it's like someone can arrive at the boss fight and either just steamroll it or like not really feel like it matches, like the tenor of whatever the whole experience has been so far. Yeah. And that sucks because they take, again, regardless of whether you do it right or not, it takes so much work to make these things, right? Because of how typically ends up.
And especially in the case of like a tier 2 boss or a tier 3 boss and how many dudes. because to even fight the tier 3 boss, you have to get gold stars on tier 1, then get gold stars on tier 2, and then start tier
Get
3.
all the way. Yep.
So you've already done many runs by the time you even get a chance to see the tier 3 boss, and then you still have that run where you've gone through to get to it with that team. And so we're probably landing in the camp of like, make these bosses a little bit easier than you would think for an end boss.
It's more like because basically again, like if you've managed to get there, there should be a pretty good chance that you can take the thing down.
Kind of earned
with minimal intervention, right?
Well, especially because if the game is already balanced such that it's supposed to feel even when you make it a long ways. If it was super easy the whole time, that'd be boring. If it was super hard, you wouldn't have made it, right? So you've already played you've done 100 rounds or whatever, right? Like,
the tension's been there the whole time, right?
Yeah. So at that point, like, and as you guys are saying, like, there's not you sort of don't have any additional levers you can pull once you get there either, because all your decisions are made. You might add a few more dudes, maybe, but like almost all the dudes you're ever going to have are there. Almost all the everything you're going to have.
I mean, basically between that goat round and then the 115, tier 3 boss round, you'll have basically 2 shops and like 1 free relic, I think, maybe. Not even that.
But compared to the amount of money you've already earned and spent, like there's just very little that can happen, right? Once you get there. So it is the case that it should feel more like a celebration in like the last mile, where it's like, not only did my dudes make it this far, but that last little bit, right? Yeah. They also,
and I will say,
get through.
It's been funny because like we updated then some of the fights in between, right? So like the 105 to 110 stretch, some of those fights we've swapped out some enemies and stuff. And I've lost on like 107. I've lost on 114 right before the final boss. So again, it's like, it's not the case that it's just like, you're just like, I'm just waiting for it to hit the boss. Right.
And it still needs to feel like a challenge the whole time.
Still got to be some tension. So it's
really importantly, tricky. The things that you're fighting in between the bosses are things that you've seen before. And so when you lose to those, it actually feels better than losing to the boss, because, if you get beat up by 100 tigers and you're like, well, yeah, I mean, I understand. My team was really struggling with tigers this whole time.
The whole time.
Right?
Yep.
And so that makes sense. But if you fight a boss that you've literally never seen before, and it's doing all kinds of stuff that you can't anticipate, you don't know how hard it hits, you don't know what it's doing, you don't know whether your team can handle it, then when you lose to that, it just feels like it's out of nowhere, right? And so we actually have to make
to be able to learn from it and do something else. Because also that gap between like, okay, I'm going to start a new round, this time I'm going to beat that boss. So you have to like strategize about what would it take to beat that boss.
Why did it go wrong?
Yeah, why did it go wrong? But then the decisions that you make the next time to then try to have the good outcome are made like an hour before you even get there, and so before you can then test out it takes like an hour to test out the new theory of like, if I do this, and assuming also you get lucky along the way, right? So yeah, it's a delicate balance to not just basically kick people out because they're like,
well,
I finally got there and then died.
And we've been making a lot of difficulty tweaks to tier 3 where we're still feeling it out, because the philosophy of it is like, as you go from tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3, you should need to be more strategic about how you put your team together, which relics you're choosing, how you're spending your money.
You just need to make better decisions the whole time, basically, right?
But it's such a fine line where like we had a 10% difficulty modifier in there.
For like the whole game.
So and the way that difficulty scores work and how many dudes is like every enemy has a number associated with it, which is its difficulty score. And then every match that you go into has a budget. It's like, all right, we're going to have 1,000 points of difficulty in this match. And then it assembles a collection of opponents that fit in that budget with a bunch of rules, but we don't need to get into that. And so with the tier 3, we were like, okay, well, we're just going to slap a 10% difficulty modifier onto it. So, the matchups that you have is just 10% more budget for enemies. You might think like, okay, well, 10%, that just means like whatever was going to happen on round 11 now happens on round 10, right?
Not that big a deal.
But it also means like whatever happens on round 50 is now 55, right? So like the gap between it's not exactly that, but it's, you can think about it kind of that way.
Yeah, but that's always how percentages work, though. Is if you're doing a percentage-based thing, then as the numbers grow, the gap grows between what
Yes.
is and what was.
And so what that then kind of meant was like, even just with a 10% bump, then suddenly everything gets squeezed really hard. And like the number of viable team comps that you could play around with shrinks, where it's like there are certain things that you just have to have, or else you're just going to get flattened in terms of like there's a certain amount of damage mitigation you need to have, there's a certain amount of healing you need to have, blah, blah. And so you can't do as many weird, dumb things in tier 3 with that difficulty modifier.
For me personally, I am very much the like weird, dumb roguelike player. I just, even if I get options, right, to make choices, whether it's like, it's in Hades, in Dead Cells, in our game, whatever. If I see what feels like would be a weird strategy, I'm going to take it, even if right next to it is the dominant strategy. Because I like the weirdness of like trying to make a thing work.
Yeah.
Right.
And it would suck if like the only times you get to do that in How Many Dudes is tier 1.
Yes.
And so we've ditched that so far. We've ditched that difficulty boost thing. But we're also going to be pretty soon working on new enemies that only exist in tier 2 and tier 3. And those will definitely add like a little bit of an edge of difficulty to it, right? But it's in like not a static fixed way, but in kind of an RNG way where sometimes you'll come across those enemies and sometimes you won't, or because you have a choice of like which matchups to take and stuff like that. So it's a way of kind of adding difficulty to the higher tiers, but by also kind of adding texture and like varying the experience more as well.
Yeah, but I think similar to what you're saying, it's like we have to be really careful with them, because I think the
They
reality
can't be crazy.
Yeah, the reality is that what we found is that squeezing the economy side of the game in the higher tiers is what makes it more interestingly challenging while still being flexible. So maybe that is like, you still make the same amount of money. It's just that certain things cost a little more. Like consumables cost a little more. You get fewer freebies, right, as you go up higher up in the tiers. And so, and some of the things like the investment dude, the business dude, takes a little bit longer to come back. Right. It's like just a few of these things that they are not big changes in terms of like when you're looking at them, you're like, oh, this is like big deal.
You have to approach things differently.
Yeah. But again, it's like all we want to do is make it so that you have to be better at making decisions about the game in those higher tiers. That's it. Because essentially that's all the game is. Like you don't have skill in terms of action, like reactive components. So all you have is decision making about what's going to happen. And if we squeeze it on both the economy and the actual difficulty level, while requiring you to go further too, it was just too many pieces, right? Because you do still have to get to the goat and then the other 5 and then the other 5 rounds, right?
Yeah.
And
that's always the risk of a balance change, right? Is if you're trying to figure out like how to adjust a thing, if you pull more than one lever at a time, there's probably too many levers.
Yeah. But it really has been the case though that the consumables have sort of been the linchpin of balance. Where like if you have a lot of consumables and they're cheap, then your team can be not that good, and you can just lightning bolt and health.
You can squeeze your way through a lot of boss fights with those.
Yeah, but so the higher tiers, by squeezing the economy, a lot of what it does is it squeezes the consumables. Where like consumables being more expensive, dropping less frequently. It means like if you lose a few dudes, and that dude juice costs $200 instead of $100, that's a hit, right? And so it's much easier to get on the back foot when things are more expensive, and then you kind of spiral and you die, right? So it's been really interesting kind of playing around with the balance of these things. We still want to try to make sure we hit that middle ground of like challenging, where it feels like your choices have meaningful consequences, and that you can make good choices and then have a payoff. You can make weird choices and sometimes it'll work and that's fun, or you can make terrible choices and then get your ass kicked, and all those things are understandable as to like why things happen and what the outcome was. But yeah, we just got to keep playing the game. Like between now and launch, just keep playing it, keep filling with the levers, because we want to hit that really fun middle ground. So that's all the time we have for this week's episode. We'd like to thank our producers, Fat Bard and Sampa Acosta, for putting the podcast together, and thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord running. To get more involved in the Butterscotch community, just go to podcast.bscotch.net, where we have links to the Discord, a way for you to donate to support the podcast, or to send us a sport ticket.
Mm-hmm.
It's
great.
We'll take that as well. And we also have links to the podcast archives there. So thank you all for listening. And if you haven't yet, head on over to Steam, pick up the How Many Dudes demo, wishlist it, get ready. It's coming in, 80-something days?
Fast.
So we're very excited. So thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.